Welcome back, guys. This is kind of a first of a series for us. We've got a whole series of Lightroom tutorials that we want to get through. We're going to break Lightroom down into different sections for you so that you can easily digest each piece. And the first thing is the whole basic section. Let's get to the first image. We're going to touch the basic tab on Lightroom. Okay, so first things first, when you come into Lightroom, you're greeted with this entire menu on the right hand side, and you've got your adjustments, you've got your histogram, basic, tone curve, and so it goes on. So the first thing I'm going to look at here is I'm going to close all of these to make it look nice and neat, and we are just going to deal with the basic drop down menu. The reason for that is whether you're using the adjustment brush or the radial filter or the gradient filter, this same basic principle applies to all of them. So you need to learn this first before you just dive straight into the brush. Okay, so the first thing is this image. There's nothing's been done to this image. Obviously, as you can see, there's nothing over here, nothing over there. Everything's pretty much normal. Tone curve is all neutralized. So ideally what you want to do is you've got your color and your black and white when you're going to edit the image. And here's color, there's black and white. And that is exactly how you edit black and white or color in Lightroom. So we're just going to do the color. Obviously, black and white, same principles will apply. And black and white is your style of image. Okay, so going with the color, your first thing that you see here is your white balance dropper. So the cool thing with this is whether you hit W on your keyboard or you actually click this thing, you can kind of pull it up and you can white balance it. So you can white balance on the skin, in the sky, anywhere you want to that you find is going to be the white balance. Now the best way and a good rule of thumb for white balance in Lightroom with the dropper is to take white fabric or a white area or a white wall that's got shade on it. So as you can see, that's white balanced over there, and if I actually reset it, you're going to see it looks pretty much exactly the same as out of camera. Now the nice thing is I shoot with a lot of flash and a lot of strobe. My white balance is pretty much spot on straight out of camera. It's when you don't use flash for some reason that you kind of got to use a lot of white balancing. So how this works with the white balance, on the right hand side you've got as shot, you've got auto. As you can see, auto doesn't work. You've got daylight, cloudy, etc. And these are good rule of thumbs. If you're battling with the image and you know it was a cloudy day, click cloudy, and then you can take your slider and you can move it up and down. So I'm just going to reset these sliders. If at any point you want to reset a slider in Lightroom, on this little white dropper, you just double click it, whichever one it is, you double click it and it resets it back to 0 or how the image came out. Okay, so instead of using my cursor, my mouse, should I say, to slide it up and down, I actually just use my keyboard. I hover over the tool that I want to use, or the slider, and I hit my up arrow on my keyboard or my down arrow, and that allows me to do fine adjustments. It's so much quicker on the fly, especially when you know what you're doing to get through an image. Okay, so I'm going to reset this, and I'm not going to change my white balance on this image, but just to show you, the best way to try sliders in Lightroom is to drag it from one extreme to the next. So blue to yellow, and so you go. Green to pink. And this kind of tells you exactly what that slider will do to your image. Okay, so because my white balance is right, I'm not going to touch it, and I'm going to use my exposure now, and I'm going to show you what it does. So if I push my exposure up, your entire basic section actually just applies everything to the entire image. Okay, so it lifts the exposure right up, exposure right down. Your contrast lifts your contrast up and down. You'll see your contrast when it goes really down, it kind of gets this gray look, and when it goes up, it adds the contrast between the lines that the raw file seems to be a contrasting area, and it accentuates that difference. Your highlights, this is in your raw image, or whether it be a JPEG, what Lightroom sees as a highlighted area, this can either drop it or lift it up. So if your sky is blown out, you drop your highlights. If it's too blown out, you'll never be able to pull those highlights back. But what's really nice when you're working with wedding dresses is you can always pull your highlights down and you can get most of it back. Your shadows, you can drop your shadows and you can lift your shadows. Okay, that's exactly what it does. Now your whites and your blacks are very similar to highlights and shadows, but the only way that I can describe the difference really is that it's a little bit more picky. In other words, if I drop my shadows here, you can see that it's kind of this whole shaded area. Okay, everything's kind of a shadow here, drops it. If I drop my blacks, you can see it doesn't really do it too much here on the face. It's a little bit more sharper and refined. Okay, now the whites does the exact same thing as I'm saying with the highlights. But what's nice is you can actually use these two together. And when I do the edit now, I'm actually going to show you how you can use your shadows and blacks together to kind of give you a poppy or a better image. When it comes to clarity, if you push your clarity up, you kind of get that street kind of grunge look. And obviously if you take it down, that's something you don't want to do. But it really helps with the adjustment brush, which I'm going to show you next week. So your vibrance pushes up your vibrancy of the colors in the image. Your saturation actually saturates that color so much more. So there is a difference between vibrance and saturation. A lot of the times you're not really going to use saturation as much as you would vibrance, because vibrance has kind of got a much softer natural feel. Right, so now that I've explained to you what this does, I'm going to show you how I'd edit this specific image. Okay, so first things first is I'm going to drop my highlights and I'm going to get that sky back. With this edit, I'm just showing you how I'm going to edit with the basic settings. Obviously, when I edit the actual image, I go through all the settings and I apply everything to it to get my final image. But in terms of basic, this is just what you can do with basic. So, as I said just now, with shadows and blacks, I lift the shadows often in an image. The reason I do that is because, as you can see over here, I don't want to lose the detail in the hair. You know, I don't want my hair to come out like that. I like keeping my shadows and my blacks kind of balanced. So I lift my shadows a bit, and to get that contrasty poppy look, I drop my blacks just down a little. So to give you an idea, zoom out, that's what it looked like before. I lift my shadows and I drop my blacks, and with the whites you can kind of leave. In a case like this, clarity, I don't use too much clarity, but when you've got nice details like this in a dress and your background is so open and bokeh and blurred out, you can up your clarity 1 or 2 clicks. And vibrance here, I definitely lift it up 2 clicks. So I just tap twice on the keyboard and it goes up to 10, it goes up into increments of 5. And there we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my backspace button and I'm going to show you the image before and after. So there's before, there's after, before, after. Okay. Now, something I always go back and I do last in my basic is my contrast. I don't like playing with my contrast first because I like playing with my shadows and my blacks. So I then go and I take my contrast and I lift it up just a bit. So before, after, before, after. Now for me, that's a much better image. That kind of portrays to me what I saw on the day, and that's the key thing. That's pretty much how basic works in an image like this. Now I'm going to go to another image, which is more of a nighttime shot during a wedding reception at the exact same wedding. Right, so as you can see, all the settings here are centered, nothing's been changed. And in a case like this, like I say, you can hit W on your keyboard and you can try and find a better white balance. But, you know, for me, I'm going to just reset that because put it as shot. My white balance is pretty much spot on and I like the look of it. Okay, so as you can see, the dress is pretty much, this came out nice and sharp. He was actually picking her up and spinning her around. If I drop my highlights, you can see I can bring a lot of detail back on the dress, but it does start to look a little bit kind of muted and the white becomes a bit grey. So what I'm going to do is, instead of dropping my highlights, I'm going to lift my shadows here once again. Okay, and then I'm going to drop my blacks just a bit, and I'm going to hit my contrast up. If I'm not going up 1 or 2 clicks, I'll just move it with the cursor because I know I'm going quite far. Okay, so for me, an image like that is pretty much done now in terms of just using basic. Obviously, if I had to get involved now with the adjustment brush, detail, and lens correction, and it's a whole new ball game. But we're going to cover that in other episodes. So, yeah, I'm going to hit the backspace here, and you can see before and after. So there's before, there's after, and you can see exactly here on the top left-hand side. If you look over here, what the shadows and the blacks does. I lift those shadows, and I just drop the blacks a little bit. So I lift the whole graduated area. I lift the whole shaded area, and then by just bringing the blacks down, which is a little bit more refined, I can just single out the different areas so that my shaded areas still have quite a bit of detail. Okay, so there's before and after. In terms of just using basic settings, I'm 100% happy with that, and then I'd move on. So that's kind of how you start. So I hope this has helped you guys with the basic settings in Lightroom. Please tune in next week. We are doing Tutorial Tuesday every single Tuesday. We've got a whole bunch of videos that we are doing and we are uploading them every single Tuesday, so please tune in. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If there's anything that you battle with Lightroom, let me know. This is Lightroom Classic CC. It doesn't really matter what you're on, whether it be Lightroom 4, 5, 6, Classic CC, CC. You might just get a variation where whites and blacks were. But otherwise, all the settings pretty much stay the same. You're only going to get a little bit of variation when it comes to your graduated filter and things like that. Otherwise, if you are on Lightroom 5 and up, this is all pretty much stayed the same. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I hope to see you guys next week for Tutorial Tuesday. Have a good day, a good evening, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.